We have to talk about nuclear weapons now.
Hard turn.
Iran is refusing to give up its pursuit of nuclear weapons. Its negotiators are still demanding the right to enrich uranium.
Well, meanwhile, the American military armada continues to increase, and the Iranian regime is now threatening a major portion of the global oil supply. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl has that story.
Vice President J.D. Vance says the Iranians aren't ready to meet all of President Trump's demands, but the negotiations will continue.
You know, in some ways it went well. They agreed to meet afterwards. But in other ways, it was very clear that the president has set some red lines that the Iranians are not yet willing to actually acknowledge and work through.
Vance says the president will decide when it's time to end the negotiations. Trump wants Iran to give up its pursuit of nuclear weapons and stop enriching uranium.
It's one of the most hostile and also one of the most irrational regimes in the world. You can't have people like that have the most dangerous weapon known to man. It would be awful for our security. It would be awful for the future of our children.
Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said the two sides reached a deal on the guiding principles for an agreement, calling it a new window of opportunity that could lead to a sustainable solution. He also said Iran won't give up uranium enrichment, which he claims is for domestic energy and guaranteed by international agreements.
This right is inherent, non-negotiable, and legally binding.
Alex Traiman of Jewish News Syndicate says the Iranians are master negotiators.
They're trying to stall the president. Every single day that this armada of military equipment is in the Persian Gulf costs the United States billions of dollars. So they are trying to drag out the negotiations as long as possible.
More than 50 U.S. fighter jets arrived in the Middle East in the last day or two. The USS Gerald Ford, the largest aircraft carrier in the world, is on its way to the region to join the USS Abraham Lincoln. Iran's supreme leader threatened to send a ship to the bottom of the sea. Iran also temporarily closed the Strait of Hormuz as it carried out naval live-fire exercises. Traiman says the move is not about military might, but signals how the regime could impact the world economy.
About 20% of global oil goes through the Strait of Hormuz. And Iran is taking an aggressive tone, showing that it has leverage in negotiations as well. Iran is saying we can make global oil prices spike very, very quickly, something that would definitely harm Trump.
The Iranian news agency now reports that Iran and Russia will hold naval drills in the Gulf of Oman and the northern Indian Ocean tomorrow, potentially near the vicinity of the USS Abraham Lincoln. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, for more on this story, CBN Chief White House correspondent Kelly Wright joins us now from our D.C. bureau. So, Kelly, the president says he wants a deal, but the growing military presence suggests a strike is coming and coming fairly quickly. What can you tell us about the timeline for that?
Well, so far what we know, Gordon, good morning to you, by the way, is that what we're hearing is that it's a 2-week deadline for Iran to make a decision. Now, you recall in June of last year, the president gave Iran an ultimatum of 2 weeks and then within 3 days conducted Operation Midnight Hammer. And that, of course, took out a lot of the nuclear weaponry of Iran. That type of scenario could possibly happen again. I don't want to get ahead of what the Defense Department is choosing to do, but the president has all of his military options on the table. That's why you have an armada of 2 Navy aircraft carriers and other vessels, as well as our fighter pilots and fighter jets moving into the region. And any operation that will be conducted will be a joint operation with Israel. As you know, Israel would like to see a total regime change within Iran and taking out its nuclear weaponry and its ballistic missile program. To that point, retired General Jack Keane of the United States Army, formerly, has stated publicly that he believes that this is a time for the U.S. and Israel to conduct a major strike against Iran because Iran is the weakest it's ever been in 45 years. And you can't discount the belligerence of the Iranian regime, which would likely result in striking some of our bases in the region, and most notably striking Iran. That being said, something is happening. We see the military operations happening there, and we see that other forces are moving into the region. So we have to wait and stay tuned to see what the president and the Defense Department will choose to do, or I should say the War Department.
Well, I remember when, under the Bush administration, the incredible mobilization that occurred right before the invasion of Iraq. There was talk of peace, there was talk of negotiation, but there was such a mobilization that, you know, I lived in Norfolk, Virginia, and every single carrier was part of that. And in talking to some military members, they voiced the opinion, when you mobilize to that degree, you can't turn it off. You're committing so many forces. Are we in the same situation now, that just the sheer size of the military in this region means that we're committed to a military operation?
According to generals that I've heard from, this is a possible strike that is imminent. It depends on Iran. This is maximum pressure that the United States is engaged in. The president, again, going back to his plan of peace through strength. He's showing strength to the Iranian regime. The Iranian regime is showing its belligerence and actually staying close to what it has always stated, and that is that it wants to continue to maintain its nuclear buildup as well as the ballistic missile program, and has even called upon the president of the United States to actually take away the economic sanctions that have been imposed on Iran, not to mention that they violated a red line that the president gave, and that they started killing its own citizenry that chose to protest against the Iranian regime in the streets of Iranian countries. So that being said, there's a lot on the plate for the president to digest, and one has to give him the time and the opportunity to consider if he will strike, and keeping in mind that it would be a joint operation, obviously, with our strongest ally in the region, which is Israel.
Well, let's turn our attention to Gaza, where Hamas also massacred its own citizens in the streets of Gaza.
Yeah.
And it's a very similar but obviously completely different situation. So the Board of Peace meets in Washington today, the international body overseeing the transition in Gaza. What are the immediate goals of that group, and what are the obvious challenges it faces?
So the obvious challenge that it faces is to disarm Hamas. The immediate goals, of course, is to actually be able to implement a program in Gaza that takes it from rubble to restitution, and becomes a restoration of its buildings, and building a new opulent place for all the citizens there to live in peaceably, and actually removing all of that debris and rubble from the constant bombardment throughout Israel's retaliation for what took place on October 27th, 2023. Now, having said that, again, the president has gone to Truth Social stating that $5 billion has already been pledged to rebuild Gaza, and Israel is standing by watching very closely to see if Hamas will lay down its weapons. Gordon, you know Hamas to be very well, just like what I do, and Hamas is not the kind of ideologic program or leadership. Their leadership wants to actually destroy Israel and destroy America. So with that ideology in place, it remains almost an impossible factor to get them to disarm on their own, which means Israeli defense forces may have to continue to be hardcore in dismantling the Hamas regime.
I think it's been a fundamental mistake for many administrations and many
Yes.
Secretary of State to somehow think that there's a rational actor on the other side of that negotiating table, that they want peace, they want success for their children, their grandchildren, they want prosperity. No, they're completely sold out to this ideology of wiping Israel off the map, and whether that's Hamas or Hezbollah or the leadership in Iran, it is absolutely certain that they are bent on this kind of destruction, and there's no negotiating that away. That ideology is going to stay as long as they're in power. Let's turn our attention to some good news, and it's amazing to have good news coming out of Ukraine. The bright spot is the first release of children that were captured by Russia, taking into Russia. And then Melania Trump is part of the negotiation on the release. I find this story incredible. So tell us, why did Russia take children? And what did the First Lady do in helping to bring them home?
So a couple of things leading up to that. Actually, this is the third round of Melania Trump's campaign to actually get the children released. And congratulations to the First Lady for being able to do this. She went through backdoor channels and appealed directly to Vladimir Putin on behalf of the Ukrainian children to get them released from Russian captivity. Now, publicly, Russia states that it has not taken any Ukrainian child into captivity. But you know, Gordon, from our reporting here in Washington with Mykola Kuleba of Save Ukraine, that simply is not true. Thousands of Ukrainian children have been abducted since this war began 4 years ago. And the sad part is that some 19,000 children have gone missing since this war began. That's the government quotation. We don't know specifically how many more have actually been missing, and unfortunately how many more have been killed throughout this terrible war between Ukraine and Russia. But the First Lady, taking it upon herself to actually reach out and help save the children, has done an extensive work with her representatives as well as the representatives on the ground with Vladimir Putin. She actually wrote a letter to him. He responded by providing representatives from the Russian government to work with her. And we're seeing a trickling, if you will, of these children being released. This last release was at least 20. We don't know the full account. I've reached out to the First Lady's office. Hopefully we'll be hearing back from them directly, and maybe she'll even talk to us directly. That would be a great thing about the great work that she's doing on behalf of these Ukrainian children. And when I spoke to Mykola Kuleba just recently during the National Gathering on Prayer and Repentance, the one thing he said is that he applauds the First Lady for her efforts. And he also instructed me that he wants to see Americans call to action, call to pray for the release of these children who are still being held in captivity. And one other thing notable to point out here, this war has been going on, and many people thought Ukraine would just fall by the wayside, yet the Ukrainian people continue to have a good fight and fight the good fight against Russian forces, to the point that Russia should be concerned about what's happened during this winter month, because through the cold and through the frigid temperatures, the Ukrainian forces are still standing.
Well, it's amazing to see the resolve of the Ukrainian people. I think it was widely predicted that Russia would have a very easy time conquering Ukraine, and that has certainly not been the case. And in the aftermath of this, and I pray the aftermath comes soon, Ukraine may emerge as a new leader in Europe, and showing all the European countries that it's time to get ready for the challenges of the future and stop being so dependent on aid from the United States. Well, Kelly, thanks for the insight, and thanks for joining with us.
Thank you, Gordon.
For you at home, please be in prayer for the situation in Iran, for the liberty of the Iranian people, also the situation in Gaza, the people there under this incredible, false, murderous death cult that doesn't care about them at all, doesn't care about their welfare, doesn't care about their future. They are bent on the destruction of Israel, and we need peace there. So pray for peace. Let's pray for our own country, the unrest here, the division here. Can we come together